Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast. Today we are in part B of the, celebration of episode 100. So episode 101, where we're talking about this assessment that leaders can take on our website, the 25 questions that every entrepreneur must answer. It's across these areas, and obviously I would encourage you to go and watch or listen to the first episode 100, before you listen to this one, because in that episode we're covering leadership. No, we're not. We're covering vision and we're covering strategy in depth and going through why those questions are important. Today, we're talking about leadership and execution and the economic engine. Welcome, Richard and Andreas, today. How are you both today?
Super pumped and thank you for having us back, by the way.
It's a sunny, gorgeous fall day here in Sydney, and it's just very inspiring. So I'm looking forward to the session today.
Yeah, I went for a run this morning. There's a lake near me. It's like a 5-kilometer run, and the sun hadn't risen yet, but it was cold. It was 13 degrees. It was just sensational. It's just a great, one of my favorite times of year, if not the favorite times. Let's talk about these things. So in the first part, episode 100, we spoke about vision and strategy and why that is so important. A quick reminder to listeners that you can go to our website, evolutionpartners.com.au, and on the homepage, you'll see the 25 questions every entrepreneur must answer. And that will give you your personalized report card and what to do about it. But really what we hope is that it'll get you to think about, where am I at and where are the opportunities that I can work on. As discussed last time, we spoke about vision and strategy. Now let's move into leadership. And so if you've got vision and you've got strategy, but you don't have leadership, what happens? It just instantly makes me think about seeing Patrick Lencioni on stage in Melbourne. And he said, I'm going to misquote him, but he said something like, if you get the right team, I would back them in any situation. And leadership is a multiplier. When you get the right people in the right seats with the right accountabilities, every function gets to work better and everyone gets motivated to execute the vision and the strategy. And so we move to the first question within leadership. We have the leadership and second level leaders required to deliver today's results and execute our future vision and strategy. So for context, second level leaders report to the leadership team. So we've got the leadership and second level leaders to deliver today's results and execute our future vision and strategy. So you might have leaders who can execute today's strategy, but not the future, or today's business, but not the future. That's what we're really looking at here. So why does second level leaders matter so much? Why isn't a strong leadership team at the top ever enough on its own? This is what we're asking about this question. I think that I'll kick it off here, and at about 50 million, what we continue to see, and often it can happen much earlier, is that leadership team can't manage the growth alone. They hit a ceiling. They get to this point where unless you've got A players in that second level, as well as the leadership team, unless you have that and they're cohesive, they just can't break through that ceiling. And I had a manufacturing company I was working with for many, many years, and that's what happened here. They got to about 40 million and the growth rate started to slow down, and then they really just bounced around 45, 46, 47 million for several years. And that was because there was a huge gap in competence and capability between the leadership team and the second level. The second level leaders were very much just focused on their day-to-day business, and they were managers of competence, but they really weren't capable or perhaps empowered or focused on executing things.
And probably those leaders, I wonder if they actually do sort of a mirror exercise and they ask themselves how much of our time we're actually delivering tasks to those second level leaders versus what if we were to give them the one thing for them to own and to drive with a clear explanation and what we've been discussing in the previous episode as well, so they can actually drive that work? Because those are the people who actually are going to execute on those priorities or on that work that eventually will unlock the next level of growth.
Yeah, I think when I think of this, I add another one onto this, another C. I'm a big fan of alliteration. So yeah, competency, capability. I also think capacity. When you get to that $40-50 million mark, you need more capacity, but it has to be with competency and with capability. And I think this is the piece that I think a lot of companies start to run out of steam on, or they start to lose focus on, is that we need to start building capacity as well, because what you need to do in a $50 million company is a lot more than what you need to do when it's $5 million. And it's one of the things I just did with a client the other week where we'd got through the management team, we got through the second leaders, we had priorities. And I said, well, what about if we were to do one more thing, which is add only one more priority for each of your areas, but for the next level down, and give them a chance to contribute. And it was just a bit of an interesting unlock, because they said, well, if we had just one more priority, we could probably do this. And it was that next thing that they just couldn't get to was a bit of an unlock. So I think it is competency, it is capability, but I also think that involving that second layer and below, you're starting to think about the productive capacity of the whole company and not just the management team.
That's what happens at 5 million, approximately, right? I mean, and it really makes me think as well about the valleys of death. It's at certain revenue levels, companies just can't break through. And what happens at 5 million is an entrepreneur is obviously working very hard and getting a lot done, but unless they can begin to trust and delegate and provide full accountability to other people that they trust to lead different functions in the business, they just can't break through, and they can get as busy as they want, but the growth will slow down. And this is what we're saying. That happens at about 5 million, but about 50 million, it happens as well. And that unless we've got those leaders at the second level, when we're going to really slow down and not understand why. We've got a great strategy. We're executing really well. This just doesn't make any sense why our growth has slowed. Question 12. The leadership team would confidently rate employees as A players and fight to keep them if an employee had a competing offer. Fight to keep them. Why are we rating people on whether or not you'd fight to keep them? Why is it just not, I don't know, they meet the scorecard criteria or something like that? Like, this is a very specific thing. And what does it tell you about the team or your team if you wouldn't fight to keep them if they had a competing offer? So this fight to keep them actually comes from Netflix, and in particular the Netflix culture deck was the first time that I came across it. The other bit, if you wouldn't fight to keep them, we will give them a generous severance offer. And this is really important because it connects to Netflix's talent density and their success. So they have been so successful because they've got so many A players in great roles and such a really strong culture within those A players. And that really comes back to this phrase, would you fight to keep them? And I think it's also just a different take, because if we just said, would you rate your team as A players? People would say, yeah, I've got a great team. They're hardworking. And what's not being said is, I like them and I'm friends with them and it works. We have a laugh together, but we're really just kind of leveling it up or adding a different view there when we say, would you fight to keep them?
Yeah, I think, this comes back to a conversation I had a long time ago that's stuck with me for years, which was this idea of kindness. So let me expand on that thought. The issue is that we stop being kind. We stop making concessions, because you're right. We love people. We love the people we hired. They're great people. They show up. They tell us great stories on a Monday morning. They had a great weekend, and they're just generally nice people. And just now and again, they don't do exactly what you need them to do, or they promise to do. And you deploy kindness as a sort of a mask for, that's okay. They're a good bloke. They're a good person. And the problem is that kindness is actually being very unkind. Because what you're saying is you're now compromising standards. And so this test of would you fight to keep them, Would you go out on a limb to defend somebody and say, no, absolutely, we've got to find a way to keep this person? If it isn't 100% yes, or a hell yes, as we sometimes say, you're just being unkind. I think you're not looking to realize the full potential of the person.
I think that then what happens is you're being kind. I've had enough. Get rid of that person. I can't stand them anymore.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And if we continue that question of would you fight to keep them, continue the question with, and what would be the impact if we decided to keep them? We know that we don't want to fight for them and we keep them. And what's going to be the impact on the other people who you will fight to keep them? What those people will think about the standards that you're setting, and what will be the impact for them, for you, for the business. There's usually a test. I seem to be loving this word these days that I run with the leadership team about certain people. So is the person that we are trying to rate, do they have the capabilities to succeed in the role? And it has to be a hell yes or a hell no. It could be a training problem, or maybe these guys, they already have the skills. Do they even understand how to succeed in the role, how to become the A players that we want them to be? And probably equally important, do they have the will to succeed in the role and to be the A players that we want them to be? And if we don't have a hell yes in those three areas, then we need to action, because it's going to it's going to impact on the people that we actually want to keep.
Yeah, it's really important. Question number 13. All team members have clear accountabilities, documented scorecards, and their performance is regularly reviewed against those scorecards. And so let's just sense check. Remember, we're getting team members, it's like taking your temperature. We're getting leadership, to say, how are we performing on this? So why is it so important that it's all team members and that we're regularly reviewing performance against those scorecards? What I would say for context, our suggestion is 90-day performance reviews. Leaders and managers would recoil with disgust at hearing that because they hate it, but we're trying to really get them to be a leader as a coach. It's easy to have leadership only. It's easy because these are probably your friends, you're close to them, and these are the most competent managers often who have the management skills to be able to do that. But what happens when you're not reviewing against that is people forget that it's what they are accountable for. I always remember I did a scorecard building session with a leadership team, and one of the team members afterwards said 50% of the things I'm doing day to day aren't on my scorecard. In other words, there's someone else's job, but also 50% of the things that are on the scorecard, I didn't even know I was supposed to do. And this is a leader. It's amazing just how much different the expectations of success are when it comes to scorecard relative to that. But it's also about coaching.
And as we mentioned in a previous episode, when the leaders are getting busier and busier and busier, this is when the business will stall. Now, equally important is when we actually give them, these people, the rest of the company, every single person, something to own. Surprisingly, they want to own that. I believe it's in the human nature to try to want to own something and make it better and develop on that and having that decision power on that one thing. And we give them the one thing to own, call it the one responsibility that they're fully responsible for, and that one measure of success that no matter what, you cannot drop this ball. Then that's when accountability really starts to cascade and we can actually unlock a bit more momentum. And probably the second point is, why do we actually recommend frequent reviews? Because we want the right people to stay in the company, the wrong people to leave the company. And usually we make that decision every year. Do we want to keep them? Do we want to exit them? Perhaps do we want to promote them? But how do we know if we actually do it just once a year, that performance review? So this is what we say. Give them the chance every 90 days to review that expectation scorecard and work with them on what are the actions that we need to course correct so that they can actually stay or getting promoted by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think I'll extend that one step further. You know, one of the ways I bring scorecards to life when I'm having the conversation with folks is they should be able to answer the question, did they have a good week? right? It's a simple question, but it's very multidimensional, because if they truly do identify with the scorecard, the accountabilities, the competencies, everything they expected, the metrics, they should be able to frame the answer to the question, did you have a good week? Starts with something related back to the scorecard. And if it does, the scorecard is resonating, because now they're worried about it. They're concerned about it. They're energized by it. My metric is glowing green. Like I say, I want them to come in on a Monday morning meeting and go, my metrics are green, nothing to see, nothing to talk about. But I'd like to talk about this, because they're already living in the moment of their scorecard. They know they had a good week, and now they're in a mindset of, what else could I do?
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. The book Onboarded for Managers, over time, as time has passed, I've really thought a great portion of that was really about the business case, not only for an onboarding, but also for a scorecard, and why it's just so important. So yeah, I think the scorecard gives us the ability to onboard, but also it gives us the ability to do those critical performance reviews that are so essential to recalibrating the manager and the team member to say, look, I think that you're actually orange on that. I know you're saying you're green, but let's talk about why I'm thinking that and how we can get you to a confident green. That is the real role of the manager or leader as a coach. The leadership team, question 14. The leadership team and second level leaders are aligned, openly debate difficult issues, and make decisions quickly. So why is debate and the speed of decisions the measure we're talking about here for both the leadership team and the second level leaders? I'll go back to question 14. The leadership team and second level leaders are aligned, openly debate difficult issues, and make decisions quickly. So speed of decisions is the measure. Leaders often underestimate the importance of players in the second level. Now, we spoke about that before when we were explaining that company can get to 50 million and hit a ceiling, and this is the key to unlock that. So mid-size businesses in a company that I was working with, mid-size business, they were having the second level leaders come together in a forum, and they were getting the team members to go through a series of questions, but it just turned into a laundry list of complaints that they expected the leadership team to resolve. They would come together every quarter before our quarterly offsite, and they would be working through and talking about all of the problems, and then we would get it, and it would just be complaint. You have to fix this, and there was no real ownership. So they weren't aligned. I'd say they probably weren't openly debating the difficult issues. It was more just complaining, and that meant that decisions weren't being made quickly at the leadership team level or the second level. And it's something that we've really kind of evolved and changed over time. So I think, how do we fix that? So we've continued to evolve the way that we approach that, and getting the functions of the business to be more aligned with their own team and their own priorities that cascades from the priorities from the top.
Yeah, and I think, for me, the challenge here is that when we get a laundry list of things coming from a functional team up through, what it tells me is actually that the second level leader or the leader is not actually acting as a coach. And not encouraging people who solve problems. What they're saying is actually, well, I'm the problem solver, just bring me the laundry list. And so it's easy, I'm going to be a bit controversial, I think it's sometimes easy to blame the team below, but I sort of, quite frankly, I'll often say to a leader, so we've got a list of problems to solve. Now we have two choices here. You can go and be the problem solver and we'll perpetuate this problem, or we need to figure out why it is that they're not solving things at their level. Is it their lack of empowerment, lack of clarity, lack of alignment, lack of trust? Like, we need to get into that, because if not, you will continue to be the problem solver, and you're just building a team of people who surface problems. And that is not what we need here. We need these guys and gals to lean in and go, no, because we understand where we're going, we are aligned, we are clear on what we're trying to achieve, we should feel empowered and energized to actually solve some of these things before bringing them forward. And only if we can not do that should that come up as a surface issue. And I think, it comes back to that the leader has to be creating the environment where they are creating problem solvers and not being seen as just the solver of problems.
Richard, that was exactly the feedback that the broader team gave the leadership team. There was a company in New Zealand. After a few changes within the leadership team, that leadership team lost their cohesion and their ability to make fast decisions. And as they usually do, they just ask through a survey to the broader team, what are you observing? What's working? What's not working? And the feedback was exactly that. People were telling them, what just happened? You lost the ability to make faster decisions. Not only you lost our ability to make faster decisions because we used to have this rhythm of quarterly planning for the leadership team, quarterly planning for the next level divisions, and everyone was making the key decisions within a week or less than a week. And now it was spanning across months, if not repetitive meetings, perhaps over and over. And it was just that waking up call, perhaps, that they needed to say, hey, we need this healthy conflict again, because without that, we're not going to make those decisions.
These questions are structured in most of them a three-part format. So for this question, we're saying, well, the leadership team, first is no. There's no alignment, there's no open debate, and we're not making decisions quickly. Second, well, the leadership team are aligned, debating difficult issues and make decisions. And then the third one is yes, leadership and second level. So many people might land with, the leadership team is good, but we're not at that point. And that connects back to that 50 million, as I said earlier. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan to build the business that you want and the life that you want. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. And you can also check out our books, Made to Thrive, which is about the 5 roles of a CEO. Becoming a great CEO rather than just a good CEO in your business. Second is Onboarded, which is about hiring and onboarding great people, making sure that you give yourself the greatest chance for people to succeed in your organization. And then third is Bigger Isn't Better, Better is Better, which is about building a business that is better rather than bigger. It's not about building a little business. It's about building a business that compounds, a business that you can actually fall in love with again. Let's move on to question 15. Our leaders actively develop the capability of their direct reports, strengthening leadership across the organization. Under leadership, why are we saying that you've got to develop the capability of your direct reports? And what does it mean to actually develop them? And what happens when it's not being done is the context here. It is about the performance review against a scorecard. It makes me think about Liz Wiseman, who wrote a book called Multipliers, quite a famous book now that I guess still stands the test of time. Liz was an executive at Oracle, and she began to observe these patterns of leadership traits which went into one of two areas. People were either a diminisher, where they shut down the smarts of the people who reported to them, or they were a multiplier, multiplying the capability of the people who reported to them. Now, in simple anecdotal surveys that I've done with leadership teams around this concept, what we found is that the average leadership team member who was rating leaders they had in the past, diminishers came in about 30% accessing of their capability, and multipliers, it was up to 120, 130% that leader would access of their capability. So again, there is this huge opportunity to really develop the capability. Now, this question isn't about, do we have all people in our organization multipliers, or connecting to that work. It's just somewhat making me think about that, because what we're saying, that is there a system? Is there something that leaders are doing, developing the capability of the people who report to them.
And I love what you mentioned, Brad. There's a key word you just said. Is there a system in place? So we don't have this inconsistent behavior. Some people will develop, some people won't. And what I've found very, very useful to activate that system is to include that responsibility of growing others into their leader role scorecard. So they know from the get-go, there is an expectation. You need to pick one or two and you need to grow them because A players want to grow. They want to get to their next level. And if you don't do that as a leader, those A players will sense it and they will leave.
Yeah, and I'll build on that, Andres. This idea that succession planning should be on a scorecard. I couldn't agree more. If on one point on scorecards, it's often the thing that's missing because we get really good at like, you will do this and you'll produce that and the outcomes will be X, Y, and Z. But this needs to be a system that has outcomes, right? So succession planning has to be something that they think about. It actually has to be something that it's exposed. I think the best ones are when everybody comes to a meeting and says, right, here's my direct report, next in line, and the one after that. And you get an open and honest debate amongst the management team about their perspectives on that. That's one thing. I think the other thing is to make sure that in putting somebody on the list to be second in command, so to speak, an up and comer, you now have an obligation, a responsibility to then actively engage in what is it around their capability or their competency that I must support them with. And when you do that, then that person is really ready, not just a name on a list because you've ticked a box because you have a succession plan, but now you have somebody who's ready, willing, and able to go into that role.
If I may, there was one more thing that I wanted to add. We mentioned before that one of the three angles that we use to review perhaps a person is, do they have the capabilities to do the job successfully? Do they understand and do they have the will? Imagine that they do understand and they do have the will, but they don't have the capabilities in their new role. Whose responsibility was that to grow that person into the next level capability?
Their manager. Yeah. Yeah. That's why leaders and managers get paid the big bucks, because it's hard, right? There is work to do. It's not just saying, I am now doing the stuff that I used to do in my previous role, except I get paid more. No, you get paid more because you've got to do the difficult things, and you've got to do the things. You've got to grow the people who report to you to be the next and best version of themselves as well as yourself. Let us move on from leadership then on to execution. So a company is just people doing stuff, and we need an execution system, a framework to surround the people in the organization so that we can be as efficient and effective as possible. Without that, the profit doesn't fall to the bottom line. Without an effective execution system, what happens is the inefficiencies and the waste and the misalignment means that the potential of the revenue to turn into gross profit and the potential of the gross profit to turn into net profit is completely lost. So the first question in execution is, the organization operates with a structured execution system that consistently delivers the goals and results we set. Why is it important the whole team operates with a structured execution and not just the leadership team? I've certainly seen a lot of leadership teams where they embed the execution system and it works and they're really happy. But once you get outside of that leadership ivory tower environment, people are just floating along doing whatever they want, and it just seems like such a wasted opportunity. So it should be, in my thinking, the whole team, right? Because the whole team is, and the execution system can be summarized as everyone has the right priorities that they're working on, the right metrics and data to make the right decisions, and the right meeting rhythm. Now, those three things, that is the essence of execution. If you want to reverse engineer a problem, go back and say, at that point, did we have the right priorities, the right metrics, and was the meeting rhythm right, such that we were able to execute effectively? I guess if we think about two distinct businesses where business A has an effective execution system, and then business A, it's only in the leadership team, and then business B, it's across all people. So you think about, depending on the size, everybody at every layer knows their top 3 to 5 priorities. They know their metrics, and they're in an effective meeting rhythm that includes, I'll say, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or an adaptation thereof that are focused on all of that execution. Like, what is the difference that compounds month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year? So I think that there's a strong case to be said that we should be focusing on the whole business, or at least working toward that.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's often a confusion that people confuse one-on-ones, and they confuse sort of the weekly meeting with an idea that we're going to hang out and just collect problems and just discuss things. The beauty of having a structured rhythm with priorities and metrics is it is just that. It's structured and it forces focus. It doesn't mean that we don't preserve some time for intelligence about things that are coming up, but it becomes a point of reckoning. The way I like to think about it is a weekly is 1/13 of the quarter, roughly 12 to 13 weeks. In 1/13, if something comes up, you have time to react. And if you then force that through the discipline of the second and the third and the fourth meeting, you get real traction against priorities and metrics, but also things that are coming up, right? That weren't captured, but it is a forced reckoning. And I think too many, I always say to folks, I say, oh, well, I do one-on-ones with all my team in advance of the weekly management meeting. And I say, but theirs is very selfish. They're about that person translating and pushing stuff to you, and only 2 people participating in the conversation. The beauty of the weekly meeting is not only is a forced reckoning, but it's a collective reckoning, because somebody will say, hang on a second, what did you just say? I don't get that. Or actually, I've got something I think I could contribute to that. And it's that crowdsourcing of everybody against a singular set of focus items that is just a moment when you know this thing is working. And otherwise, it's just a chat and a hangout. And we don't want chats and hangouts. We want to be 1/13 closer to achieving the quarterly goal.
Then the leaders are complaining, but I am telling them what to do, exactly what to do, when to do it, how many tasks they need to do, and still like getting consistent results, getting the leader busier and busier and busier. So great people want to own things. They want to understand how the work that they're doing is contributing to those company priorities and to the greater good of the company. So that's why the set of priorities and a clear set of numbers and a clear set of meeting rhythm is what is creating is that heartbeat of the company, where people understand why they need to do certain things, why not to do certain other things for the greater good. Otherwise is what we usually call this genius with 1,000 helpers. It's a task delivery. No one understands why inconsistent results kicks in. And then the leader gets frustrated.
And the tail end of that question 16, that first execution question, is consistently delivers the goals and results we set. It's not about saying you need to do something more. Currently, this is how you're running meetings and priorities and so forth. You got to do this stuff on top of it. It's about the most effective way that an execution system can consistently deliver the goals and results that you've set. Number 17, every major function and process in the business has a clear owner and performance that is regularly measured and reported. So why is it important that owners of functions are regularly reporting and measuring on the performance of that function? Seems a bit obvious, but it's so rare. It's so rare. You may have someone who is a sales manager, but are they reporting on and measuring the performance of that function? Is it the same thing or is it different? I think that for me, it creates functional ownership. If you've ever sat in on a meeting and the CEO is reading out a report from the accounting department about sales performance, and the sales team or sales manager is just sitting there and not really owning it, sounds so subtle, but we're really trying to say this person owns it. No one else owns it. The sales manager owns it, and that matters, because you can write it in a scorecard, and you really must write it in a scorecard, right? But this functional ownership is another form of accountability that we haven't, that ensures it's being unlocked. And sales is the easy one, but you think across the other major functions, are they being measured and reported accurately as a function by the owner?
What's the alternative, right? That the leader then creates a dependency. And we discuss what happens when the leaders, they create all that dependency on them, where the leadership team gets busier to a point of their maximum capacity, and then the company stalls. So maybe the question to be asked is, what do they need the next level down to get clarity on how we can cascade that level of function ownership? What is the leadership role in creating that capability and that understanding so they can actually own it, absolutely own it?
Yeah, for me, this comes back to something that we often do very early on when we work with clients, right? Is this building out of these things. Love about that is when it finally clicks, people realize this is basically the process to move money from competitors of the market to their bank account. What they also realize as a function owner is my output is the input to somebody else who moves money across this system. And when it finally clicks, you see this aha moment, because let's pick up on sales. If sales is yellow on their metrics, the temptation sometimes is, well, let's figure out what's wrong with sales and kick the sales manager and kick the salespeople. And what we haven't asked, the other question is, and how is marketing doing on creating demand? Actually, yeah, well, they've just been sitting on their hands because they have no deals, no leads to go pursue. And so this idea of functional accountability, I think, is only driven home when you map it out and you actually flow the outputs of one team into the inputs of another. And then you see some subtle things. When you break it down, you might find within the function, there might be something still problematic, but it's that ownership of the function by the owner and the ownership of the inputs and outputs that starts to bring unbelievable clarity to the fact that this is an ecosystem. It is not just ownership, but it's their position within that chain. And I think when we see those things, that's when we see great companies getting really clear on how to move money from the marketplace into their bank account.
Yeah. And that functional owner might be incompetent. And that functional owner may be, I'll use Liz Wiseman's word, a diminisher. They might be, shutting down the smart sort. They may have a team that is not A players, or they might not. Whatever it might be, we want that ownership, and we're trying to encourage to say, do you have owners, or is it all kind of drifting back up to the leader of the business? Question number 18. Each quarter, the most important priorities for every department and individual are clearly defined and consistently delivered. Every department and individual, we're saying not just the leadership team. Think about the people, who are maybe front line. That's the hardest one, where you think, hang on, they just operate a machine, or they just do this. Like, they've got no interest in the company strategy. Well, our job is really to find what is the challenge, the problem, the opportunity in that functional department that we need to work on at the moment, and then to get people to be working toward that. It could be that we're not making budget. It could be that we're bringing in a new product and we need to understand it deeply. It could be a whole range of things, but are we trying to get priorities to cascade throughout the organization? What can happen is leadership team members get so busy that they don't delegate. They hoard. They bring in the priorities and they say, yes, I will go and manage my team and I'll get them operating, and then I'll find a little tiny bit of time and then I'll work on my priorities. But that becomes problematic, because then we go back to the second level leaders problem, where those people aren't growing. The orchestra conductor doesn't play an instrument, and that works for the CEO, but it also works for the head of the function. They've got to be able to predict and delegate and get those people to move.
Yeah. And I think, for me, it's, this comes back to something that Andreas, I think, had said earlier. Most people have an absolute need for contribution. They don't show up to do an average job or a shit job. We train them to do that. because we don't challenge them, we don't give them clarity. And I think by pushing down, it's not pushing down 10 priorities to the CSR on the phones who's taking calls to book a trades business flow of business. It's given one thing for them to obsess over. If it's the quality of their call, the NPS, and then we connect that back to why is that so important? There's a sense of ownership, belonging. There's a sense of, and I think we miss that beat sometimes when we get so obsessed with the leader and the leadership team having all of their metrics that we don't find a way to get people down on the front lines, as you said, Brad, connected to the reality of the business. And I don't mean in a I understand the strategy as well as the CEO level, but I understand that when I do a call and that call ends in a booking, and the person gives me an amazing rating because I really listened to them and I solved their problem, they are executing strategy at the finest, most unique level. And I think we've got to find a way for us to do that in all businesses, because when we don't, we sometimes are left wondering why it's just not working in the business.
Yeah.
One of my clients, educational company that I've been working with, they've been working on the last 2 words of that question: consistently deliver. So they created a system where every quarter, the leadership team will do the quarterly planning, and then the next level functions or departments will do their own quarterly planning as a cascading effect, setting one priority at a minimum 1 priority per person, every single person in the company. Not only that, they will actually use those priorities to include them in the role scorecard review every single quarter. So people will be not only owning that, but driving that and making sure that it's delivered, because that's going to show in their next review. And funny enough, people loved that idea. They absolutely loved it. They created thematic goals. They made it fun. They created goals across departments, and they started to work together. And it was not only the results of the company from a financial point of view, but the level of retention in an industry where there's a bit of a churn. Some people call it the revolving door. It was so high, the level of retention, that people started to post on LinkedIn as well through their own experience of owning those things, where previously they were not allowed or never encouraged to do that.
I guess that makes me think, if we zoom out, what we're talking about here is the execution discipline across these 5 disciplines. In the first year we're working with a client, we're really focused on building an execution machine. We're really focused on ensuring that the business executes really well, because there's no point coming up with a strategy if you can't execute it, because suddenly then you'll be just spending time and effort on strategy when you can't even execute the base of the business, and you won't be able to actually get the things done. And so in the context of that, it moves us on to question 19. Our meetings follow a regular weekly, monthly, and quarterly structure, have clear agendas, and are valuable to participants and lead to timely decisions and alignment. So that is a perspective, a take on what does an execution machine look like. So why is decision-making quality the measure of meeting effectiveness? Why are we saying that decision-making quality is the measure of meeting effectiveness?
It makes me think about a hospitality company that we're working with. And one of the biggest challenges was that the decisions were taking weeks, sometimes months. And the repercussions of that impacted them on the customer and eventually on their own results. So when they implemented a series of very structured meetings, they understood for each meeting what are the decisions that they need to be made. When we're talking about an yearly session, that's all about strategy and the next 3 years. When we're talking about a quarterly planning, it's about the next 3 months and how do we evaluate the priorities and cascading down. When we're talking about a monthly meeting, it's all about the deep dive on what actually happened last month and what decisions do we need to unlock to keep the momentum going. And then weekly is that tactical week-on-week decision-making to make sure that there's nothing blocking progress on that. So that's probably one view, because bad meetings, it's probably such an expensive hidden cost, not only from a financial point of view, but from a morale point of view. it completely destroys teams.
Yeah, I think I'll just add a tiny bit to that, Andres. You'd love it to be that if I said to anybody who's holding their regular cadence of meetings, like, was the meeting boring or did we actually do something valuable in this meeting? And if there's like a ho-hum feeling about these meetings, then it falls upon the participants, the chair, the leader, to reconnect why we do this meeting. Like, it's not to have another meeting. The last thing in the world we need is more meetings. What we need is a few good ones where people go, that was good. We solved something. We surfaced something. We made a decision. And there's got to be a vitality to it. There's got to be a bit of joy to it that we're actually together for a few minutes and we do something really valuable. And I think if you keep coming away from your management meetings and you're going, oh my God, that was like like I got a headache just going to it, then there's something wrong. And I think you as a leader, you really need to step back and say, what's wrong here? What is it that I'm doing? If I've got the cadence and I've got priorities and metrics, then what is the sense of curiosity or the sense of joy or the sense of urgency that you're bringing to this meeting that people go, this is important. We must be here. Because if it's not, you can do all of the right things and still end up with an assessment that was a boring meeting that is actually not contributing. These meetings must contribute. They must contribute to success.
And that's one of the fears when we start working with companies is they think you just want to add more meetings. I'm not effective now. I'm not achieving what I want now. If I'm going to add more meetings on, how is that going to actually, like, it doesn't make any sense. It's not what we're suggesting at all. What we're suggesting is more effective meetings. I think that the question is, why is decision-making quality the measure of meeting effectiveness? I think that's what happens when team cohesion, think any team within the organization, prioritization, genders, and healthy debate all come together. If decision-making quality is the output of all of those things kind of coming together in this special sauce that makes meetings work really, really, really well. The simple test is maybe asking team members, how would you rate this meeting out of 10? Now, if you haven't got honesty in the team, that could be a problem straight up front because they might score you higher just to suck up to you. But yeah, I think that it really comes back to decision-making quality means that you've got a good meeting. Question number 20, closing out the execution discipline. The business consistently meets or exceeds its revenue, profit, and cash goals over multiple consecutive quarters. Why does it need to be consecutive quarters? Why are we honing in on that point? Why is it not just we've had a good period or a good quarter or even two? Why isn't that enough? I guess for me to kick it off, I'm really thinking when it's consecutive, it's like we've leveled up to the next level to begin to be able to predict the future. When you look back, and it's so rewarding when you get a team to say this, when you look back and the leadership team says it would be probably 9 out of the last 10 months we've hit all of those things consistently, the confidence that the team gets to be able to start to predict the future is so powerful, and just translates down through the organization, but also into the future to be able to effectively implement strategy. And it is all of the jigsaw pieces that we work on through all of these disciplines starting to come together. And that's how you can really sense that. And it's really empowering for a leadership team.
Yeah, empowerment and confidence are words you use there. For me, it's this question is almost the question, because this is when I ask this question, often at the beginning of my engagements with somebody. If they don't know the answer, that tells you a lot. If it's inconsistent, that tells you something too. But the fact that they're not asking that themselves of each other tells you a lot. And I think it is that consistency and consecutiveness that leads to something you said, right? Is management teams often are confidence teams. They thrive on a tiny bit of confidence and clarity. And this is their way of building that compounding confidence and clarity, is when they know they can do this consistently with a great team, you can almost do anything else because now you've got the foundation.
And we are talking about an execution system. So having one quarter of good results is luck. Having quarter after quarter of good results, that's when you created a system. And that's why we work with our clients over the first year of creating a consistent execution system, consistent results. So by the time that we build a successful strategy, it can be executed consistently well. Otherwise, we have these ups and downs, and then people maybe don't understand why it's not working.
But it's not working. We know that much. Yeah, its execution is funny. And you know, there are people who tell you, "Oh, well, look, we'll sell you this software system, and it'll change everything." But it's the habits, it's the disciplines, it's the framework overall that comes together to create these important things.
There's if I may add one story, there's a multi-trade company that we've been working with, and they started with inconsistent results. As we build the strategy, we build the execution system, they started to hit quarter-on-quarter results. That brought them to what I call a once-in-a-lifetime exit opportunity, because the people wanting to invest in that company, they were looking at astonished to those quarter-on-quarter consistent results and the accuracy of that forecast they were creating.
Yeah, that's an important point. If you execute your plan quarter after quarter after quarter, at some point, it positively impacts the multiple valuation of your business, right? Any regular business can go into any regular business broker and they're going to say, yeah, you got a 2.5 to 3.5, maybe 4 if if you catch the sunlight on a good day. But if you would like to get more value for the asset that is your business, it is the consistency of the execution machine coupled with the strategy and position in the market and the profit, all of that coming together, it works and it comes out consistently through the execution machine. That takes us to the economic engine, the fifth of 5 disciplines. Why might we talk about the economic engine discipline being so important? Business does not exist for profit, but it cannot function without profit. We do a lot of work with companies in the health space, and it's a big challenge to get those leadership teams often to think that profit is necessary. It's not something that someone else has to worry about, because it can be the culture within that industry. And it is not that we're obsessed with it, but it is like blood flowing through the veins. It's necessary, but it is not the purpose for life. And so the first question in the economic engine discipline is, our economic engine is clearly defined and guides how we generate profit, cash, and long-term value. How do you make money is an interesting question to ask someone who hasn't been perhaps working with us for a long time, and they can clearly have a simple, distinct answer to that. Ask any company, how do you make money? And they might say, oh, well, we sell widgets, or, we're a real estate company, or we're a health company. But we're not really answering the questions there. In the Good to Great study, of which he wrote the book Good to Great, Jim Collins identified that one of the biggest distinctions or differences between good and great companies is that they had a deep understanding of their economic engine. So why is it so important that our economic engine is clearly defined? Why can't we just informally understand it, like get a bit of a sense of it? Because we're really digging a bit deeper in there. What do you think?
One of the first activities that we do with clients is to identify these, as Jim Collins calls it, the economic engine or profit per X, and help them identify what is that X that will drive the maximum potential for that company. And what we usually highlight is that is the most strategic number that they're going to have. All of the other numbers are great, and that is the most strategic one, meaning it will help us guide decisions, investment decisions, capital allocation decisions. It will go hand in hand with the strategy that we're going to design, because it will have the biggest impact in their economics. And when it's not even identified, then we might decide to go on one way or the other, or sell widgets here or there without really understanding, so what's the money that we're leaving on the table? Because we haven't identified that biggest strength, let's say, that if we were to put $1 into that profit per X, it will multiply that more than anything else.
For me, the profit per X is just like a North Star. the one thing that it's funny, it's not often a favorite of, quote, the accountants, because they want to give you the P&L and the cash flow statement and the balance sheet. But for me, the profit per X is this way of just boiling the entire business down. And when you see a trend in it, it tells you much of what you need to know about the business. But it also becomes a bit of a North Star, because you can then make projections on it, and you can track to your projections. You can measure the activities quarter after quarter to it. It is just such a simple way of boiling down a complex business to a very simple number, a ratio. And the beauty of it is that you can talk to anybody about it, from the more junior person to the more senior person. And once you explain what it means, they say, okay, so if we get more of those things, those X's, and we were good at our pricing and our costing, we can't help but make money. I'm like, bingo. And if it's upwards and to the right, what does that mean? Well, it means it's a growing business. What does that mean? Well, that means we can fund salaries and investments and buy new things and invest in new products. Bingo. So for me, it's one of the most simple metrics on the planet. But so often when we ask the question, how do you make money? We get an answer of, well, I have to have this certain amount of revenue, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. It's not about, I need more X's and I need to control my costs while leveraging my pricing power in the marketplace. This is just such a simple thing, but when it lands, it's fantastic. I mentioned, I think earlier in this podcast, I have a client who's got that one metric now across every single person in the entire company. Not because every single person can do, 100% of the effort required to change that metric, but because they see it, and they see it as red, yellow, or green, or super green in some cases, they know exactly where the business is at. And that tells them a lot about what they're doing in support of that. So that's why I love profit per X.
Yeah, it's interesting because this discipline is called economic engine, and that includes profit per X. And as Andres, as you said, the profit per X is a strategic measure. All of the others are normal metrics, but this is the one that, probably weaving in what you said, Richard, it gets us to really ask the questions when we have a deep insight into it that we wouldn't otherwise ask. And that's what matters to get us to unlock new areas of value. And that is a segue into question 22. Leadership receives clear reporting on and actively manages the economic drivers of the business, including profit per X, productivity, working capital, customer lifetime value, and customer acquisition cost. 5 areas that, if actively managed, have just an outsized impact on the financials of the business. But it sounds like a lot of work, right? It sounds like, why can't I just get my accountant to send me the numbers? And what are all these things? Why do they matter? Or why can't I just get it sometimes? And what does it mean to be actively managed? But some listeners might be thinking, why can't the CFO or accountant just worry about that? So it makes me think about a piece of a response I had recently where I'd discussed this with the CEO, and on the surface, perhaps not knowing the power of it, he said, yeah, okay, we'll send it through to our accountant. And then the accountant had a private conversation with the CEO saying, I'm busy. I haven't got time to do this. There's a lot of work in here. And then I, of course, got that feedback back. And I said, what are they busy doing? It's probably stuff that AI could do, number one. It's probably stuff that is reconciliation or just things that are not effective. But I showed him an example of another client where we've successfully done it and the insights it was giving the leadership team. And he was like, this is the most important thing for the accountant now. Like, we've got to get the clarity on those, because if we've got that built into the execution machine, actively managing those drivers, it's going to be a game changer in terms of financial impact.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's remarkable when these metrics land. I'll give you one example. I have a business where they have what we call a negative cash conversion cycle. So meaning that they get paid by their customers long before they get paid. They pay out to their suppliers and partners. Now, on paper, if you were not actively managing, you just sit back and feel quite satisfied. When we spent a session talking through these metrics, the thing that came out was I said, well, why is it that the number changes every single month by quite a dramatic number of days? And there was sort of a bit of a stunned silence. And I said, okay, let's look at the impact of that in terms of cash in the business. And, we go from massive surpluses to less of a surplus, but we're still, negative cash conversion. What's going on? And what we realized is that we actually had some other levers that we could play with that would give us more cash in the business, accounts payable, days outstanding, so on and so forth. But it was because they were stopped looking at these numbers as just a number reporting on how it went last month, and they started to inquire as to what could we do with that lever. They were able to free up more cash for the business, especially at a time where they were going through some challenging trading conditions. So what I love about this question, Brad, is the fact that we focus on this active management. It's not good enough just to put all of these metrics in place and see them on a scorecard. That's good. And it's certainly better than just looking at a mind-numbing P&L. But the next stage of this is like, why is that number the way it is a great question, because it starts to get the management team really understanding kind of the central nervous system of the business. Like, how does all of these pieces work together? And I think when companies do that, that's when we see a management team really participating in the health and the growth of the business.
There's nothing worse than being in a leadership team meeting where one of the functional heads is saying and implying that they've got no interest in the financials, and they're sure they don't care about maybe the other area, but it's almost as if they're saying, it's not my job, it's someone else's job, and I don't care. I only care about my little bit over here, because it just breaks the cohesion. And if you're going to make good decisions as a leadership team member, it is your responsibility to understand. You don't need to be an accountant, but you've got to understand some of these basics. And we've only got 5 that we're talking about here, but you've got to understand some of these basics and why some of these things matter.
And there are different views of the numbers. By no means we are saying that the accounting view is wrong or they don't want to do the job. They cover an essential role for that accounting view of the numbers, which is, keeping the internal books organized and making the ATO happy, as the law of every country. But we're talking about the management view of the numbers. This is why the question starts with clear reporting on the key numbers. And what is the clear reporting and understanding for the owner and the leadership team of the management view of those numbers? 2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting with 2 business owners, and they brought their financials. One of them, they have their own accountants, and one of them, they brought 7-page document. The other person brought 15-page document where they were saying, well, this is what my accountant gave me. And they told me everything is right here in my hand. But they didn't know how to read that, how to interpret that to unlock better ideas. We boiled it down to a dashboard, an owner dashboard, that this is what we are providing nowadays to our clients. And the moment that they understood all of these questions, their profit per X, their productivity, the working capital, the customer lifetime value and the customer acquisition cost, and the impact that 1% or 1 day will have in their economics, it completely unlocked a different set of ideas.
And that makes you understand and ask different questions than you otherwise would, to the earlier point. That's great. Question 23. We have a realistic 3-year budget. Realistic 3-year budget that gives us confidence on how we'll meet our revenue, profit, and cash goals. So why does confidence matter so much when it comes to our 3-year budget? It just makes me think about a team that I'm working with, and the second level leaders in their meeting were saying the budget is not achievable. It was as loud and as clear as it could be. We are not going to achieve the budget. Now, we did probably a little bit better than last year, but we didn't achieve the budget because the budget was unrealistic. Now, in the CEO's mind, there's this thing called stretch goals, which I think should be banned from our language because it's supposed to motivate people, but it doesn't give confidence is the problem, right? What stretch goals do is they make people say, well, I am working as hard as I can. It's not making me work any harder, and I'm not going to actually, if we don't get it, it's outside of my control. The other way is to set realistic goals. And that doesn't mean that we're underperforming. I think that we should be building a structure and a framework and a system to be as effective as we possibly can without waste. But it is this immature perspective when we think about it as stretch goals, this immature perspective that if I whip the horse harder, it will run faster. And it just is not how human nature works. It's about cohesion and alignment and prioritization and getting things done. But I think that confidence matters because it means that you're systematically getting better at predicting the future. And that's what we really want leadership teams to be able to do.
Love that bit of systematically, because otherwise what the leadership team has is hope. And when we start working with a client and we talk about, by the way, Brad, you mentioned budget, and I cannot help but translate that into forecast. And when we start talking about that 3-year forecast, they usually tell me, well, we hope that we will get to these 3-year goals. And maybe today we'll do a little bit better, a little bit better, and a little bit better. And perhaps we hope that we will be better. Hope is not a system. Hope is not strategy. So if we don't have confidence, we don't create confidence, then we're not doing the hard work on all of the previous disciplines that we've been discussing in the last 2 episodes. Going back to that example that I mentioned before, this company in Adelaide that created a once-in-a-lifetime exit opportunity. It was because they had a 3-year forecast and they were hitting quarter-on-quarter results. And those investors, they saw that opportunity. They couldn't even help but understand if we put $1 today in this company, by the time that we get to the next 3-5 years, we are going to achieve these things because it's proven systematically that this team is achieving quarter by quarter results.
Yeah, I think confidence is the operative word here. I mean, when we do kickoffs and when we do annuals and when we use this idea that, we can forecast the future by looking at widgets and the profit per X. What I love about that session is I always say to the accountant beforehand, you're not allowed to say anything. Don't say anything about the numbers. Don't influence the room. Let's see what the team thinks they can achieve. And by working through the math of profit per X, they go, wow, so that would mean this number of consignments or technicians or widgets sold. Okay. And if we could grow that at 15%, and so they do the math and they play around with the numbers. But what is remarkable is when you then reveal all of the consensus answers that come back on the mural that we use, the numbers are literally within a million or so of each other. And so what that tells you is that by managing and being actively engaged in the metric, you start to understand the sort of central nervous system of the business. But most of the people actually understand what the business is capable of. And this mechanism just gives them just that, a mechanism to be able to confidently align on a consensus. And then you sort of test it a little bit. But what I love is that they're all like, yeah, we could do that number. And so now what you've got is not only confidence, but you've also got a little bit of commitment. And that's what I love about it when we do these forecasting exercises is it's not a license to spend money like a budget, but it's almost like an encouragement for performance because they forecasted this number. They created this number. They're aligned to it. And so the confidence and the commitment is remarkable when they get their heads around how these metrics work.
Yeah, the people who build the plan don't fight the plan. That's what's in my mind when you're saying that. We've got to get that team to be aligned and cohesive. Question 24. Investments and resource allocation are aligned with strategy and delivering strong cash generation and returns on capital. Part of the economic engine. So why are we tying cash generation and returns on capital to our strategy? It instantly makes me think about one business where the CFO didn't understand strategy. Now, that company will remain nameless, notwithstanding that person had an accountant's view on the world, and they thought that what the job to do is to take last year's budget and add 5% onto it and then have some arm wrestles with each of the functional heads and then land on a number that we muscled the business to achieve. They only looked at it year on year. But strategy costs dollars to implement, as I mentioned, I think at the beginning of the first episode, and it must create a return. We want not only to be measuring and focusing on those things, but we want to be able to say as a temperature test, those things actually working. Are they actually delivering, creating the end results there? If they're not, it questions the discipline. It questions, is there a lack of discipline here?
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because we're really good sometimes about putting a case together for what this thing has to achieve, and this prompts me to lead to two things. I think one is it needs to be a consistent evaluation against those numbers, those projections, those case numbers, and that's not an accounting view. That's a management view of, have we placed the right bets, and are we monitoring, supporting, encouraging, enabling this to achieve its numbers? The other thing that it comes to mind is, this discipline, even down to like hiring a person. So, we do a lot of work with our clients, most of it, which they would recognize terms like simple numbers, where we use this concept of the labor productivity. And, somebody came to me the other day and said, I want to hire a salesperson and I'm thinking of paying this, and I found a candidate. I said, okay. I said, so how much money must they produce within a year for you to feel confident and satisfied that that was a great investment? And there's sort of a bit of a stunned silence. I said, okay, let's go back to basics. What's your DLER today, or your direct labor efficiency ratio? Oh, it's 3.7. Okay. So if we take $1 of salary and we times that by 3.7, this is what they must be producing. If we know the gross margin percentage, we know that that means this much revenue. Are you now confident that you have found the right person for this investment? And it's that type of discipline of using the numbers backwards just to test what seems like a good idea, a nice person to fill a role. And now there's ooh, wow, okay. When you put it in those terms, this is a real allocation decision. This is a real investment decision. This is not just hiring somebody. This has to have a real economic payoff. And I think that's the key here, is that this discipline has to sort of permeate through every decision. And it doesn't take a lot. Like, that is a 5-minute conversation with a few numbers on a piece of paper, but it just enforces that every time you make a decision to allocate hard-earned cash and capital, it's got to be clearly defined about how that decision must pay out, as well as how do you make the decision.
Richard, you mentioned the simple numbers approach. And that's the approach that we use with clients, which is from Greg Crabtree, a financial guru who wrote the book Simple Numbers and Simple Numbers 2.0. And last year, we brought Greg Crabtree to Perth for a client-only event. And he mentioned something in the room that stuck with me since today. He said, the return on invested capital is probably the number one measure of success for the owner or CEO of the company, because it measures the effectiveness of their decisions. Now, but what does it mean? He said, when we have a disciplined way of investing or allocating capital, that means on a 50% return on invested capital, for every dollar that we invest in the business, we should be generating $50 cents, of net profit. And then that is the work that we do with clients, to teach them the discipline on how to simulate those investment allocations or capital allocations in 4 or 5 simple steps using this approach. And it was just a wake-up call for me. Anyway, it was a wake-up call for our clients when they started to simulate those scenarios in 4 or 5 simple steps. And it was a day and night, because it's not just about the numbers or doing the thing. It's about unlocking the next level of ideas, the next level of understanding, the next level of capabilities, because that is what it takes to compound.
Question 25 out of 25 brings it all together. This is the last question of the economic engine, and it's really, as a stress test or a temperature gauge, it's really making you consider, probably to your point, Andres, am I getting the return on invested capital? Is this money working hard? Are we effective as a business? What am I doing this all for? There is an infinite number of ways to waste money or to be ineffective. And what we're really asking here is, our profit is 3 times the industry average, reflecting effective execution of both strategy and budget. So working on the business and in the business. Interesting, because we're really naming it. We're saying that if you do this well, if you do this right, you're going to be aiming towards or thinking about 3 times the industry average. Now, it's a controversial question, okay? Because what we're saying is, well, what if you don't know the competition? What if you don't know the industry average? It might be an easy and very lazy response. But if you work on this, understand this, and then say, are we really doing this? Like, are we actually a great business? Have we got a team of A players? And when all of these things come together, that's what we are saying that you should be able to work toward and ideally achieve. See, there's an easy way and a hard way to measure this. The easy way is to say, look, the average business might make 5% profit. A great business should be aiming at 15%. Now, there are some services businesses where if you're not making 25%, you're doing bad, right? The simple numbers approach that you mentioned, it has a way to normalize profitability. So we can, without going too deep on that, we can get a sense of that. On the weekend, I was with someone who works with stations, which are the largest farms in the world in Northern Australia, and they work on about 60% or 60 cents of every dollar coming back to them. So it's a highly profitable business, but very difficult and hard to get into. But there's an easy way and a hard way. We can just say, all right, well, the average is 5 and let's go for 15. That's the simple and quick, dirty way. A bit harder is benchmarking. It's not so hard that you shouldn't do it, but then we can begin to look at what is the benchmark of profit for my industry. You can probably get an AI to do that pretty quickly for you. But either way, it's demonstrative that we're doing things right. We think across these multiple disciplines within the business, the leadership, the vision, the strategy, the execution. And if these things are coming together, this is what we should be achieving.
And probably adding a different flavor to that answer, Brad, when all of these systems, they are coming together, it's not just the profit, but what we are creating is compounding freedom. Freedom for the owner, freedom to unlock the next level. In the work that we've been doing with companies from different industries, once it unlocks that compounding freedom, we consistently include the business owner personal goals into as if it were part of a strategy. What do you want for yourself and for your family as the business compounds year on year? So as you said, Brad, the company is not just designed to create profit, although it is important and that's the work to be done, but it's how do we also unlock with all of these systems that level of freedom that every business owner was actually probably into business to achieve in the first place.
Yeah, I think, for me, when I got to this question, I think of it like I'm not a big fan of sports analogies, but I'll try one here. When you think about like the Premier League of soccer in the UK, there's a reason why some teams perennially are in the top 1, 2, or 3 spots, and it's because they consistently outperform their competitive set. It's not just, one season, but it's a compounding effect of every single decision from facilities to players to merchandising to pricing to the coaching quality on the ground with the players that have been assembled. And as a consequence, when you're at this level of 1, 2, 3 times your industry average, you can do things that nobody else can replicate. So for me, it's not just the fact that I've got a number that's perhaps 3 times an industry average. For me, it's the opportunities that it provides when you can consistently do that.
It's where it all comes together, right? And you're really running a much better business. You can't consistently build and run an enduring business unless you bring these disciplines together. And that really brings together the end of this episode. That was a bad way to bring those together, but that really brings together to our conversation over these last few hours, over 2 episodes. I suppose I thought for quite a long time, how should we mark a milestone for the 100th episode? It's a big investment doing a podcast. I started, as I said at the beginning of the episode 100, really just have interesting conversations with interesting people. And I feel like we've definitely met that criteria today, just pulling apart this. And I wanted to just bring together this learning, this sense that our questionnaire that we'd been working on and it evolved it was worthy of just having this discussion and taking it out there. So maybe we'll just switch to reflections over the whole question set across these 5 disciplines. Andres, would you like to go first? Just your reflections across the whole, 25 questions that every entrepreneur must answer.
I actually, by going through this conversation, not only did I reflect on the clients that I'm working with, but also learned so much from the stories from both of you, Richard and Brad. And it made me think about a different level of impact that companies, leadership team owners can think of rather than just growth, or perhaps how to define better. And it's that key word that we mentioned a few times, compounding, discipline, systems, because that's what actually unlocks the next stage.
Yeah, for me, it's been a great way to think about all of the bodies of work that we both create, the bodies of work we refer to, the inspirations we get from our clients and from just the general marketplace of people we do business with, owner-led and founder-led businesses. But being able to offer a composite system to be able to interrogate and question and challenge and to bring to life all of that in a simple way that allows people it's not about whether it's, you got a score of this or a score of that. It's about creating curiosity for your business and in your business and what could I be doing better? And I think, for me, if you're better to tomorrow because there's one question that has just got you thinking, how good is that for the company and the people who work for you? That you'll be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. And for me, that's what this scorecard, this assessment has sort of created in my mind, is this opportunity to find that one thing I could just go work on to be better tomorrow.
Yeah, that's my reflection as well, is really, as I've been working through these questions in preparation and with you all today, just thinking, this client, we could do that. That client, we could do this. Or that is another way a different take on something that we'd thought of. And that's really about the evolution, right? That we're called evolution partners. It's about this continual evolution to get better and better and better over time. And so that's the way that I would reflect on the work that we've done here. And so for listeners, first of all, thank you so much for making this far. This is a record episode. We haven't done an hour and a half episode, I think, before in all 100, plus the 50 minutes or hour before an episode 100. So thanks for making it. What we found with others is when we did the Bigger Isn't Better book series, what clients did and readers did is they read a chapter of the book and then listened to the episode context as well. And that's kind of what helped us to inform this episode, is to say you can complete the assessment and you can listen to our kind of reflections and thinking around each of those questions. So hopefully we've been able to add some good value for you today. Remember, the assessment is on our homepage. You can go there. Very easy to find. 25 questions that every entrepreneur must answer. What you will get, 2 minutes to complete it, you'll get a clear understanding and diagnostic of exactly where you're sitting and what does the next level look like in each of those 25 areas if you're not, I guess, answering a full and strong yes in every area. So thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure to be able to spend the time with you both over this conversation, and really just dig into what we are. Richard, Andres, thank you so much for your time, and listeners, thank you for your time over this extended podcast series. It's been our pleasure. I do hope that you all have a great week and back next week to our regular scheduled programming. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.